Hello there. So this evening I'm going to talk to you about Psyops. In case you're not familiar with the term, a Psyop is a psychological operation which is traditionally conducted by one army, nation or force against another. And this has been well known for so long before Sun Tzu wrote his book, The Art of War. Wonderful Chinese sage, very interesting book. Psyops have been carried out, and usually the idea, well, let me give you a very simple idea. Just imagine a long time ago, and you've got some English soldiers, and they're going into Scotland, and suddenly they are confronted by the skirl of the pipes, and they see these peculiar looking men wearing what look like skirts, and they're producing this most horrifically unusual sound. That's a very simple example of a psyop. So you want to undermine the morale of your enemy. So you've got two forces, they're having some kind of a war. That's a normal situation. But what we have in the present time is something a little bit different, because these days psyops are not done from one country to another or from one tribe against another. This is actually where it's done from the government to the people. So in every country in the world, psyops are being conducted against the citizens of that country, and they're being perpetrated by the government and by secret organisations within that government. So for example, if you take the UK, we've got something called the BBC. Now the BBC have been performing the psyops against its populace for an extraordinarily long time, and they used to be very sophisticated about it, and they used to do it in such a way as it wasn't blatantly obvious. But what's really happened this year is that the blinkers are off, and anyone sitting down to watch the BBC with any sense of the ability to discriminate the information that's being sent to them realizes that there's something very odd going on here. So the morale of the nation is being undermined and subverted by an organization which is supposed to be providing impartial information. So that's an example of a site that a lot of us are very familiar with. So let me cut to the chase. All the mainstream media in the nations of the world are perpetrating psychological operations to undermine the populations of those countries. So that's what's going on, and that's pretty straightforward. I'm not saying anything that's at all surprising here, but what I feel I need to do is to speak up about what about the alternative media, because I feel that this is where there's a lot of blinkers are still firmly attached to people's retinas, and they're not actually awake to what's going on. Because I'm going to do the thing I like to do. I'm going to put myself in the shoes of an elite organization which was running a program, and the program is, we don't need so many people around, we need to get rid of most of them. We've got the Georgia Guidestones as a simple example. It says, carved in stone, in the state of Georgia in America, we want to reduce the population of the planet from around about 7 billion to around about 500 million. So 13 out of 14 people need to be disposed of, eliminated, eradicated, let go of, retired, all sorts of words you could use. Retired particularly comes from the lovable Terry Pratchett. That's what an assassin does to his target. If the target is retired, quite appropriate in the context of what we're talking about. So if you are blitzkrieging and broadcasting messages, and don't forget the wonderful Nazis in the 20th century gave us the story on this one. All you need to do is repeat a lie often enough and most people will fall for it. And there was a really significant experiment done in the UK with something called Brexit, and they bombarded everyone with Brexit for over 3 years until people were sick of the sound of the name. But it didn't matter, it was doing its job, and it was a very effective psyop campaign, Brexit. So we have the current one, and it seems to be even more effective, because basically if you ask people to do almost anything, they just do it, even if they were told only a matter of months ago that that would be a unsuitable or harmful thing to do. They go right ahead and do it anyway. So we get that, but what I really want to focus in on now is the alternative media, because if you can manage to subvert the minds of the majority through the mainstream media, that's a pretty good job, but it's not good enough. What one needs to do is to be able to get at all the residue, the remainder, the minority or minorities. And so the way this is done is through using all of the powers of the internet to have a literal plethora of competing voices, all of which are also spouting lies, which they say so frequently and so often that it starts to sound like the truth. So they use really the same procedures and methodologies as the mainstream. And it's an interesting game that they're playing, because the mainstream is promoting view A, everything is what view A is, and then along come the alternative media through the internet, and they're promoting view B, C, D, E, F, G, all the way up to Z. And they're doing exactly the same thing as the Nazis did in World War II. They're just repeating a lie often enough and saying it convincingly enough that you start to become sure that that must be it. And so you start to believe not in the mainstream lies, but in some other lies. And so this is what's been going on. And things have been hotting up, particularly this year. We've now got the stage that I literally get bombarded on a daily basis by people who are very well meaning, and they're sending me this information, that information, the other information, and it's all doing the same thing. So my take on it is as follows, which is both the mainstream and the alternative media are pulling out all the stops, and they reckon if they repeat something, anything for long enough, we'll end up believing it. And here's what I would like to do, is I'd like to provide you with what I call the discriminator. My discriminator is as follows. If that information, when you are receiving it and taking it in, whether it's a film or an article or a podcast, whatever format, doesn't really matter, a piece of music, because they use all formats, you need to be aware of this, all formats I use. So whatever format is being used, if the result of taking in and receiving that information causes you to go into a state of fear, then I would say to you that you've just been subjected to yet another Psyop. Because all Psyops are designed to keep the population in a state of fear, agitation, depression and disempowerment. And they want people to cling to a belief system, any belief system, so long as it's fundamentally underpinned by fear. Whereas, if the information you're receiving doesn't do that, but actually gives you a sense of empowerment, a sense of connection with others, a sense of love and appreciation for your life on this planet, then I put it to you that is most likely not a Psyop. That is most likely genuine information which is being presented to you to counter what I would regard to be the plethora of bullshit which we're all being overwhelmed by on all platforms, whether conventional or alternative. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw one in from an interesting organisation, and what they are doing is they're actually targeting, it's one bit of the internet targeting another bit of the internet and putting a judgment on it. So what I ask you to do is just, if you can be bothered, if you want to, you could have a look at the link and see how it feels. And it's one thing I would like to say particularly about that very well respected gentleman David Icke, which is that if you're watching something about that David Icke is speaking on, what you need to do is ask yourself the same question, because it was David Icke himself who, when he was receiving the benefits of the plant medicines and really connecting into the ultimate truth of what is, he wrote a book, and his book was called Infinite Love is the Only Truth. Everything else is illusion. Everything else is illusion. So I do feel that David gave us this little golden key. Now, there's a lot of his statements that he's made since then actually don't fit in with that, and I could say seem to be very much according with broadcasting or passing on the fear mantra. So we don't need fear mantras. Fear mantras are definitely not for our benefit. The mantras that provoke empowerment, provoke connection, provoke appreciation of each moment on this earth, and anything that invites you to connect with nature, you know that sound. But if it produces a fear or an anxiety response in you, maybe you've just been psyoped, and maybe you might feel like more and more of us that enough, no more. I'm going to be very discriminating about what I choose to take in. Maybe you might feel like that. Thank you very much.